I listened to her on her podcast and I died laughing. And being a pastor's wife now, mind you, I forgot, did you grow up in ministry?
No, I was way too straight-laced.
Oh,
no.
I was that one. The police officer would always come find me.
It was always the same people who were speaking in tongues and then the same person interpreting,
I would just love to see a few people dancing or waving their flag or on the ground.
No! That Amy Grant was singing the most innocent lyrics.
Baby, baby.
I'm taken with a notion. Angels bow before him, heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve.
This is the Sprinter Mom with Lashes On podcast.
So I am back with my friend Alyson from the Unlikely Pastor's Wife podcast and account. She is here to just chat with me about something that I listened to her on her podcast and I died laughing. And being a pastor's wife now, mind you, I forgot, did you grow up in ministry?
No.
No. Okay. But you were just a big church attender.
Oh, whenever the doors were open, we were there.
Okay.
3, 4, 5 times a week.
Big church attender. What kind of church did you grow up in?
If you know Assemblies of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we didn't handle snakes. It wasn't that, but we were speaking in tongues, falling out in the spirit.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's true because that's how I grew up.
Oh.
So it is the same. Okay,
yeah.
So I had to have
wild.
Alyson on because I was there are just things that you have to kind of poke fun at.
Oh, yeah.
Of growing up in church in the 90s. And there are certain churches, and of course, however you serve the Lord and attend and worship and what you do on Sundays, great.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting back in the day. So can you share some of the things that are just people now attending church would never even grasp that?
Well, one of the biggest things I remember growing up was no dancing. And you and I like to dance.
Yes, love it.
We've enjoyed several dancing experiences. And I remember telling my mom I wanted dance lessons. I wanted to take dance lessons. And she was like, we don't dance. And I thought, well, that's dumb. As I was in 6th grade or whatever. I think now it was because my mom couldn't afford it.
Now that you know.
Now that I get it, as a parent, and the commitment. But they wouldn't let me go to dances. So I remember in 6th grade, there was a dance during lunch. And of course, I went. And then we had a dance for 8th grade graduation. My parents know, and I went. And I remember I got in trouble because I didn't tell them. And then they finally let me go to dances when I was 16. I could make up my own mind,
Yeah.
But there was no dancing. Drinking was absolutely not. Now, granted, I grew up in a home with an alcoholic dad, so that was a big deal. But even just drinking in general, it was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that. Purity culture was a really big deal back then. I mean, I don't know if you did the purity ring and
yes. So we took the classes.
Okay.
There were classes, and then after graduating from the class, your parents gave you a ring.
Yeah.
A purity ring. And one of the rings I got, I remember not being that nice, but one was a really nice one. I think they gave me a purity one when I was younger. And then when I was in high school, they gave me a second one because the other one had
tarnished.
I probably lost it somewhere. And then I ended up losing that purity ring in the parking lot of high school. Go figure.
Well, the purity culture thing, I did a whole episode on just that because that was a whole thing.
That would never be allowed in today's times, would you say? I think it's pretty shameful towards girls.
It was.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I say this in my podcast episode, I talk about how I came upstairs to the youth room to pick up my sister from youth, and I was in my cheerleading uniform. And my youth pastor's wife pulled me aside and was like, don't ever walk in here ever again in that uniform. And I'm like, all of these kids see me at school in my uniform. It is not a big deal. But I felt very shameful about that. I think we just have a different mindset now than we did growing up. It was all about in the 90s, it was just about you have to make sure that boys is, you don't make them stumble and you need to cover yourself. And I'm all about modesty, but there was such a pendulum of like, it was the girl's responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a heavier topic in terms of like growing up in the 90s.
Down that road.
Again, that's why I did a separate episode on just purity culture, because it was it really did damage a lot of people. And it wasn't in every church. It was just in certain like denominations and sects of churches. But that was a really big thing.
I mean, we used to have like, if someone would have an affair in the church or something, the pastor would have them stand up and would like tell them they're not welcome back. Like that's happened before.
Well, that's really interesting that you say that, because my dad had several affairs and he did have to stand up at one point and like repent in front of the church.
What?
Yeah. I remember that distinctly. It just really wild things that you wouldn't see nowadays. Now, granted, I went to a smaller church of like 200 people. The church that, we attend right now, I mean, obviously that wouldn't happen, because it's a very large church with several campuses. But I'm trying to think like what else in the 90s. Oh, secular music. Oh my gosh.
You were not allowed to listen to.
No.
At all.
No. And it was, I say I wasn't allowed to, but I would go in my room and I would listen to the radio.
Yeah.
Because, I grew up on Biggie and Tupac, and, 90s hip hop is totally my jam. So obviously there was a point, but I remember I was in 6th grade and Amy Grant came out with her Baby Baby album. Or Heart in Motion.
It was so controversial.
Oh my gosh. You would have thought that she like was sacrificing children to Satan.
Yeah.
Like that's how big of a deal it was in the Christian world in 91, 92.
Yeah.
That Amy Grant was singing like the most innocent lyrics.
Baby, baby.
I'm taken with a notion. I could like sing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really big deal. And I remember I had the VHS tape.
You're aging yourself.
I'm totally aging myself. It's not Beta though. Do you remember Beta?
No.
Oh, you guys am I aging myself with even you guys with Beta?
BETA?
Yeah, it was like a smaller version of the VHS. So when you'd go to Blockbuster, they would have the Beta of the movie and the VHS.
Oh, no, I do remember seeing those. I just didn't have a Beta.
No, I didn't have a Beta either. I'm just saying.
It was an option.
It was an option at that point. So anyways, I remember having the VHS of Amy Grant's Heart in Motion. There's like 3 songs on the VHS. And I, after youth group one night, like came home and like ripped it apart and shredded it and was like so convicted that I was listening to Amy Grant, Baby Baby, And then like a week later, I was so mad because I wanted to watch the VHS. I was like, no. But I remember having like youth group things where you'd bring your CDs to the altar.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
Well, I don't think we ever it's interesting. I don't remember. Secular music was like a no-no for my church. But instead of my parents being about that, they just always listened to the oldies. And so I grew up listening to the oldies in the car and never thinking much of it. And then like in junior high, I started to listen to like Shania Twain or Reba McEntire. Like country was allowed, but that's when Boyz II Men was huge. So like I would listen to some of their stuff, but I think because it was love songs, my parents, they didn't die on that sword. Right. So like I just always thought, my parents never listened to like Christian stations all the time, but it was always oldies, which are oldies but goodies, 94.5. But it was like, it was so pure. And so that's why when I got into country and then started hearing other things, but for my whole life, I don't know the lyrics to songs. So like I sing songs, but I don't know the words. Like I'll sing them, but it'll be the wrong words. Kind of like,
like what song?
Bone Thugs and Harmony. It's
like,
bum, 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 what you gonna do when they know where to hide just because of you.
And you're just like,
yes. So like I've never known the words to songs because I just don't look up the lyrics and I don't care. I just like sing whatever. But when I was coaching a private school cheer team, we did we played I'll never forget this. We played Tonight's Gonna Be a Good Night by the Black Eyed Peas, and it was like super nice, and literally they say that over and over and over again. Well, one of the teachers came up to me after we like danced to it on the field, Friday night football game, and one of the teachers came up to me and was like, like shocked that I, one, chose that song, and two, I didn't know that that song was about like sex. And I'm like, well, I think it's like, tonight's like, let's hit it off. Town. Da, da, da. Anyway, drinking and sex. So everything's about drinking and sex. But like, I was like, I guess I just don't know the lyrics. But I was like, oh, okay. But that's just always been me. Like, music is not something I want to die on, unless it's like Cardi B and like with WAP? My kids. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're not doing WAP.
We're not doing WAP in our house. Okay. There is a line. There is a line in our house. We'll talk about hoes and pimps in 90s music, but we ain't doing WAP.
Do you remember, though? I will never forget this. And I wanted to say this to Ryan the other day. I'm like, do you remember the very strong men that would come, and they would be strong for Jesus?
Yeah, the power team.
The power team. And they would put ice on their bellies, and they were on the nails, remember? And they would take the hammer and nail it on the ice for their belly because they were strong for Jesus.
I don't ever remember that part, but they blew up water bottles. They blew up hot water bottles. Like, you know, the ones you put like the old ones that you put hot water in, you like put on your stomach or your back. They were like plastic.
No, I don't.
Yes. And they're like red. They would blow them up like balloons until they popped. They would rip phone books.
Yes, I remember ripping phone books.
I don't remember
chopping bricks. Do you remember? They would chop bricks. Yes.
It was the power team. It was totally bizarre. The most bizarre thing ever. Do you remember Carmen?
Yeah. And we danced to a lot of Carmen music. Like, we used to have...
You did human videos.
Human videos?
Yes. That's when you say dance, like in church, you would dance?
Oh, on stage.
Yes.
Like, we had dance.
You would act out.
And I was always in the front. Oh, no. That was... Yes, we did act out. Even when Ryan and I did youth group, we did...
human videos.
Yeah, totally.
It's what they're called. And like Jesus on the cross, and then you had like the drug dealer.
And then you have Satan come in.
Like, yes.
And then the people are pulling him like, be rescued. Yes. That's, oh gosh, what was that band?
Lifehouse had that one song.
Yes, that everyone did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, those are called human videos. We would have people come in and for like a week do a workshop with anybody in the youth group that wanted to do human videos. Because then we would go to Fine Arts Festival, which was like this talent show for kids in the Assemblies of God. And they would have like short sermons, female vocal solo, which I placed. And nationally I did. We would do like human video solos, like all of these things. And so we would have people come in for like a week, teach us all these human videos so that we could take them to the Fine Arts Festival. Yeah.
And you know, it's so funny that anyone who didn't grow up in the church would be like, you're doing what? And like, I remember seeing So You Think You Can Dance. And like, I wasn't trained in dance or anything. Yeah. Like growing up, we just literally, they were like, put on this Christian song and put dance moves to it. And so you would. But I will never forget like seeing interpretive dancing and being like, I feel like we created that. Like at church, you know, because it was like, you just dance to where the Holy Spirit was leading you. And yeah, contemporary dancing and interpretive dancing. And it was like, that's what you did when the Holy Spirit was moving. And so like, I didn't think there was like professional training for it. But there is.
Yeah. The Pentecostal movement started contemporary dance.
And then somewhat it became secular. I don't know how. We should bring it back.
No, we should not.
Every now and then when I'm in church, and granted, you know, depending on the worship or whatever, but every now and then when I'm in church, I'm like, I would just love to see a few people in the front row, although in one of the campuses, they do dance in the front row, but I'm like, I would just love to see like a few people dancing or like waving their flag or like on the ground.
No, I am so like
swaying in the spirit.
I still am very like, I have like Pentecostalism in me, you know what I mean? But I feel like some trauma. And my mom and my sister and I always talk about this. And even Ryan, my husband, like we talk about the crazy things now, you know? Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm so like, I don't want to say I'm anti that, but I'm like, it freaks me out that I'm just like, no. I remember my mom and I have talked about this. And if she watches this, I'm not making fun of you, Mom. Okay. I'm just, we've talked about this. So my mom was taking sign language.
Yeah.
And so her worship would be like signing the song. It's crazy. They rush on the city, they run on the wall. The great is the army that carries out his word. And like she would be doing all of this sign language as her worship. And I'm not making fun of her, but I just remember being that, and it would be like, or we would sing in the 90s. Did you guys ever sing What a Mighty God We Serve?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, did your whole congregation do angels bow before him, heaven and earth adore him, what a mighty God we serve? And the whole congregation is serving like a volleyball.
We did not do dance moves to it.
The whole congregation.
I do remember that song though. What a great classic.
What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. Angels bow before him, heaven and earth adore him. What a mighty God we serve. And then we'd go, in him we live and move. I mean,
it's a whole thing.
The 90s were wild.
I was learning sign language at our church nights. My cousin was actually teaching it, and because when we broke out into our classes at church, and we sang "Oh Happy Day," and we did all of "Oh Happy Day" in sign language.
That's name.
Amen.
I don't even know what day is.
And I'm like, so I'm telling the kids, I'm like doing the rejoice and stuff in the car, and they're like, "What are you doing, Mom?" I'm like, "I'm trying to remember the sign language to this song. Oh, happy day,
happy day."
But I'm like, sign language was a form of worship,
I guess.
Well, when we were married, we went to this church in Flagstaff, and it was the first time a church scared me, like, because I'm not afraid of much. Mind you, I've never seen the snake thing, but I've seen a lot of things. And that's why I'm like, Satan's real. Get me out of here. If there's demonic stuff, I'm getting the heck out of here. But we went into this church in Flagstaff, and Ryan and I were like, we come in and everyone knew we were new because it was like, a church of probably 40, 50 people. So it was like, clearly they're newcomers. So we came in, and of course, you couldn't sit in the back. Like there were only chairs left were like in the second row on the corner. And his friend had like raved about this church. Like, it's so great, so spiritual, you love it. So they start the music, and it's a recording, and it was like, kind of like Lion King music, like very African, and like, you didn't know the words. So it wasn't like typical worship. But then like people started coming out with the flags. There were flags you could choose from. And I was like, oh, I grew up like this. Like you could go choose a flag that represented how you're feeling. Like there were certain flags, and they all had different, like some had a cross, some had colors, and so like you could choose your flag. Well, so this church had flags you could choose from, and people were waving them. But then this lady was also painting at the same time. And that was like their form of worship.
Yeah.
So we got into like 4 songs, and after the 4th song and everything happening around us, Ryan turned over to me and went, "Fend for yourself." And he walked out. And then I was like, and so
with
then
your flag?
Like,
did you have a flag?
No, I didn't have a flag.
Where do I put this? I'm leaving.
We were like 22. But then I was like, okay. So then you like slowly start scooting down. And finally I was like, screw it, and grabbed my purse and walked out. But then they were like stopping us and like, thank you so much for coming. I mean, we were like 20 minutes in because their worship service was long. But I was like, that was the first time I was ever actually myself shocked at a church service.
Really?
But like, would you invite friends to church growing up?
Yeah. I mean, my stepsister.
Well, I never would. I was so embarrassed.
No, it was just normal. I mean, the girl who's my stepsister now was one of my close friends in high school. And I know that's a whole story. And she, I invited her to our church, and that's where she met her husband, who was our best friend's brother. So yeah, I know it's we came from a small town. Okay, there wasn't a lot to choose from. That's why I got out. I needed a bigger pool of men to choose from. So I would totally invite friends to church, and some of them were freaked out. I remember specifically when we dedicated Eliza, our daughter. We wanted to go back to my hometown and have my pastor, because I respect him. I think he's a wonderful man, godly Christian man. So my sister brought at that time her boyfriend, who is now my brother-in-law, and the guy next to him. And my brother-in-law did not grow up in church. Like nothing. The guy next to him started screaming out in tongues, like shandalaying and shamalahamalaing, like nobody's business. And he was like, and my sister grabs him and goes, don't leave. Don't leave. Because it was so I'm not trying to make fun of people who speak in tongues. Please, I'm not. But it was so outrageous and loud. And my brother-in-law was just like, what is going on right now? But that was normal in our church.
Yeah, that was like, so normal. That's why I didn't invite people. Like, I knew it was normal for me and everyone in my church group and my friends. But then I never mixed the two. Like, I would invite people to camp because camp was a little more like easier dive into.
Oh, no.
But the congregation, I was like, at any moment, someone could be kicked out or be slain in the spirit or start speaking in tongues. And then they would stop the service and then they would wait until someone could interpret it.
It was always the same people.
Yeah.
It was always the same people who were speaking in tongues and then the same person interpreting. Like, you know, come to find out the woman in our church now had like had an affair on her husband and now like they're divorced. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It was wild. We had modesty clause in the front row. So like if women were wearing skirts and they fell out in the spirit, they could have a blanket over their legs.
Oh, yeah, we had that too.
They were modesty cloths.
Yeah.
I know when people find out like how I grew up. Now Ryan grew up in an Assemblies of God church, but it wasn't like that. He grew up actually at Phoenix First, which is now Dream Center.
Oh yeah.
Or Dream City or whatever, Dream Center, I forget. So it wasn't quite like that.
Yeah.
Mine was a little more what manifesting? I don't know what other words. A little more expressive. That's what I'm looking for. It was a little more expressive.
Mine was very expressive.
And a little more wild now looking back on it. You know, and that's why my pendulum has totally swung the other way.
Yeah.
Like speaking in tongues, you know, it was just a little weird in the 90s growing up in that. And what's crazy to me too is I see a lot of people that went to youth group with me that aren't even following the Lord anymore.
Yeah.
Which is sad too. And I don't know. I don't think it's because of things, but there were some really weird things. Now I would invite people to youth group because we didn't have any of that.
Easier invite.
It was an easier invite.
Yes.
Main service, like they had to be in youth for a while before they'd come to
I think there was a lot of sin shaming, but it wasn't like, I never felt like it was Baptist-esque. Like when I hear people that grew up in like a Baptist church, it sounded way more conservative, way more shameful for girls, way more rules and strict, where I felt like maybe mine had rules, but they weren't obvious about it. Or like there was obviously modesty stuff and all those things, but it wasn't like kids being called out on certain stuff.
Did you have to at camp wear a t-shirt over your bathing suit?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which my mom was always pissed about. She's like, that's your issue. Because
Good for your mom.
I can't speak for my mom. Yeah. Because it was like, no, that's their issue. And
I mean, you're literally drowning in this huge oversized t-shirt while all the guys are walking around with their shirts off. Now, granted, you know, you could wear a modest bathing suit, but you had to wear a t-shirt. Yeah. And you're in the pool, like, and it's like, as you're trying to,
you're drowning. You're drowning in the literally t-shirt. Going up. It's like and make sure it's not a white one either. It has to be black, so then you're like really hot, and all you want to do is be in the water because you're dying in the sun.
Oh, we couldn't do
Phoenix.
We couldn't do mixed bathing, meaning when we went to camp, boys swam at one time and girls swam at another time.
Oh, wow. We were not that strict. Mm-hmm. I was allowed to do dances and go to dances. Well, not with a guy, but like I was allowed to go to dances even in junior high.
Oh.
But at church, it really wasn't addressed ever.
Really?
Because I think we were all dancing for the Lord. So it was like, it wasn't officially dances, but like everyone would dance.
At church?
Yeah. Like when the worship music was going.
Oh, yeah. We call it the Pentecostal two-step. I can do it right now for you, but I'm not wearing the appropriate bra. We do. And we call it the Pentecostal two-step.
Where you go side to side?
No, it's like, you're like, like, I mean, it's a whole thing.
Okay. Well, I will have you back.
Okay.
This was just a fun blip to chat about church in the 90s.
Talk about it
and
forever.
We still ended up attending church now. And
we still
believers.
love Jesus.
I know.
We still love Jesus. And we still, like, I'm a pastor's wife. and I probably was the most, I was going to say.
I think if you can look back and laugh at it, then you're like healthy.
Going back to dances, we had prom alternative. We can end it on that. Did you guys have prom alternative?
No, but the Christian schools did. But I went to a public school.
Well, I did too, but our youth group had it.
Oh, no. We only did fall festivals. So like that was our alternative. We never, ever, I didn't trick or treat until I was pretty much had kids. Or like
really?
We would go kind of down the street after our fall festival. Because Halloween's demonic. So
you didn't do Halloween?
No, we didn't do Halloween. We couldn't do trolls. We couldn't play with trolls. We couldn't play with unicorns. If Harry Potter was around when I was young, nope.
Smurfs?
Like it would have been burned.
We allowed to watch Smurfs?
I remember the Smurfs, but I also don't think they were like
portrayed
as like ogres and,
Yeah.
They weren't so fairy tale-esque.
It was the magic of Gargamel.
Magic is not allowed.
I was allowed to watch Smurfs. My parents were open with like TV and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dancing, the music, we had prom alternatives. So I didn't even go to prom in high school. I wasn't even asked. But I know it's really sad. I mean, I was pretty. I don't know what the deal was.
Ryan, ask her to prom.
But we did
prom and go.
We did prom alternative. And so we went to Seattle and stayed in a hotel with our youth leaders and dressed up. I know, right? Like, don't go to a dance, but let's take you all to a hotel and eat dinner and
potentially have stuff.
What?
Like potentially things could go down?
No, I don't. No. I think we were all way too straight-laced to ever think anything about that. But yeah.
Well, when the power team was on at my church, I was in the back kissing boys.
Oh, no, I was not doing that. I was way too straight-laced. No.
I was that one. The police officer would always come find me. We became friends.
No, and I'm actually going to do a podcast episode about how my youth pastor lied about me and I didn't get into my school of choice.
I remember that story.
Because he thought I was doing things I wasn't doing and lied on my recommendation. And I'm like, because there's a lot of trauma, but we've turned out okay.
Yeah.
So, and now we just do better for our kids.
And God is good.
And God is good all the time. All the time.
God is good.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us today for the Sprinter Mom with Lashes on podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. We'll see you next week.